Today, we're going to be talking about local services ads and how they relate to fencing and decking companies. What we're going to cover we're going to talk about local services ads and what they are, and where you can run them, how it works, how you can get started, and then also what it takes to get ranked in the top results, and how you can take advantage of these leads, how you can use them to your advantage. And if you're trying to get more leads, local services ads are a great way to do that. And we're going to kind of break down how all that works and best practices. Okay, so if you haven't been to one of these webinars, we haven't met. Name is Alex Danner, owner and founder of Fence and Deck Marketers. And we've always, ever since starting the agency, I've been in the industry over 10 years and started Fence and Deck Marketers about 4 or 5 years after having an agency. I worked with anybody and everybody. So we wanted to focus heavily on fencing and decking. And we provide a lot of free content, not just these webinars, but also the podcasts. I wrote the book, Best Known Fence and Deck Contractor. Do a lot of stuff with webinars, social media, and they're also really involved in the industries. I speak at all the major conferences, and we partner with a lot of the major manufacturers to teach contractors, and also part of the NADRA Education Committee. It's one of 5 people there where we kind of lay out all the different education that's going to be given to contractors through NADRA. Kind of the foundation of everything that we do with marketing is we want to, in order to really grow a business, and if you have, more ambitious goals, it's really, really important to be omnipresent. So we do the same thing for that within our own agency, trying to be seen everywhere and, be remind people of who we are and, kind of what we do. So same thing. I want that to be done for you. And that's how you can kind of really grow that business, build a brand, and, really have good growth each year. But 3 principles. First is maximizing opportunities. And what that means basically is you got to have people coming in. You got to have those leads coming in where you're actually getting people coming in to talk about your services, leads, and getting more at bats basically to get the opportunities you need to grow. So if you don't have the opportunities, it's going to be hard to grow. Or if you're not getting more than you were last year and you're trying to make a revenue jump, you need to make sure you're getting those more opportunities. Number 2 is going to be maximizing the brand impressions. So this plays into heavily with the whole omni presence. People need to see your business consistently. And a stat I say constantly is the rule of 7 in marketing. May or may not have heard of that, but that's basically an old adage that says, you have to see a business 7 times before they work with you. But nowadays, we're just being bombarded with ads. If you go to Facebook or Instagram, they seem to show up. Ads seem to show up more than ever now. So they did a study. Neil Patel, he's a very, very big digital marketer. He said now for services that are B2C and roughly or around $10,000 or more ticket price, now it's no longer 7, it's more closer to 23 times. So if you're just kind of doing one type of marketing, yes, of course you can get leads from each type. But if you really want to build that brand and maybe you want to sell it one day or pass it on to family or just feel better about hiring and having that consistent lead flow, you need to have more of those brand impressions. And then, of course, once you get the lead in, you got to convert it. So there's no point in having a lead that comes in if you're not able to actually turn it into a job or a viewer of your website, your marketing, without turning it into an actual lead. So you got to make sure you're set up to look good and convince them to actually work with you. What basically local services ads are is they're a Google platform that is very effective if you do it correctly in terms of getting leads. It's actually a pay-per-lead service. So if you've ever heard of Google pay-per-click ads, that means somebody clicks on your ad, you get charged, you have to pay for it. With Google local services ads, it's pay per lead, meaning you only get charged if a lead actually comes. So you can kind of specify what types of jobs that you want. And then if, Google will then send you those types of leads and talk about how you can get your money back if If basically a bad lead comes in, or say you're a fence company and you specify you only want installs, but a repair lead comes in, there's ways to get your money back so you don't have to pay for those. Whereas pay-per-click, you don't have that flexibility. So kind of how I think local services ads started is, there's all these companies out there that you probably heard of, like Yelp or Home Advisor, Angie, where their basically whole basis is getting shown on Google at the top. So if somebody types in, best deck builders near me or best fence companies near me, Angie and all those sites would show up at the top. And then from there, they would kind of sell those leads and give them to multiple people. What I think Google did was, well, they decided they own Google, so they, of course, can do what they want. So they create a service similar to this that's better than those, in my opinion, and put themselves right at the top. And they also knew the importance of reviews and how that weighs into decisions. So they put those reviews on there too and kind of linked it to your Google business profile. And so far, we're a big fan of them here in most situations. And I'll kind of explain that. But they do work well. There's a very high risk, low reward, and something definitely worth trying and seeing how it works. Okay, so the reasons why you should use local services ads, there's quite a few, but basically everybody goes to Google. So 87% of consumers go to Google when they're looking for home service provider, fence or a deck. And that's the number one place people are going in general. So you already know that people are going there. And if you're haven't been living under a rock and know about AI, you may be concerned about that, which it should be something you're adjusting for, but still Google is the main player. AI hasn't taken that big of a chunk as it may seem. But since most of those people are going to Google, once you're there, Google local services ads are going to show up at the top. So they're going to be right there at the top of the page. And that's very, very prime real estate for Google, since that's where everyone's going. So also with Google ads in general, or Google leads, they tend to be higher quality, because if somebody's in there like, hey, I need a new fence or a deck, they're going to be going to Google more than likely when they're trying to move forward. So if they type in fence company near me or deck builder near me, that can trigger the local services ads. So we already know that those are searches that trigger a lot of leads. They're just kind of commercial type searches. So it's very high intent keywords that trigger the LSAs. So that's a very big reason to do it. But you have to make sure you're doing this. I see this often where people kind of run them, but they don't know the inner workings of them, and they can get themselves into trouble and really ruin their accounts. So that's a big part of what I'll be talking about today, is how to avoid that. Okay, so in general, fencing local services ads are much better than decking. So with fences, it's great because they have a separate category for fencing. So if you go into local services ads and you go through the whole setup, which I'll show you in a second, they have a category for fencing. And then under fencing, you can specify the category. So fence installation, fence repair, and they have a couple other categories. What we've seen is that works really well. And the businesses, or the categories, I guess the industries or the services that have their own category and have subcategories like fencing, they seem to do a lot better. Whereas decking, for now, they don't have a separate category. It's under, decking itself is actually a subcategory of other primary categories. So decking is under carpentry and general contracting. So that becomes a problem if you're looking for just deck installations, because since with fence, you can say I only want fence installations. With decks, everything is combined. And you could even get, deck repairs, deck maintenance, things that aren't deck installations. You still have to pay for those leads. So in general, it's not a bad idea to start these, and I would, just to have them, but kind of monitor it and see, make sure you're not getting all bad leads. You can still get good leads through this, and we have seen it succeed. But in general, it tends to not be as strong as fencing. Okay, so to get started, so for anybody, I think there were a couple that hadn't started these, so you need to make sure you complete the application. I'll show you how to do that. And then you need to do the background check. So you need to make sure you can pass that background check, for one. you have the license, the insurance, and then the background checks do evident. Basically, once you're approved and you're active in that area, the cost per lead can kind of vary. It could be 30 to 60. It could be more than that, just depends. But usually I would say 30 to 60 is kind of a good number. Um, so very good for the most part. Tend to be a little bit cheaper than pay-per-click, and because there's a lot less risk in terms of bad leads, it tends to work out a lot in that favor as well. These are kind of showing, I guess, how they work exactly. So first off, I think we just mentioned this, the fence contractor, there's a separate category. There isn't one for deck builders. It's under carpentry and general contracting. No matter what service you're doing, you're going to have to do that background check, but you only have to do it one time for the owner. It's not like you need to do it for every single employee. So it's not a really hard process. It's usually pretty quick. And then getting the insurance on there, the license requirements, that can kind of vary depending on the state. If you are required, then you'll need that. And then some of these are the subcategories. So I mentioned them earlier for fencing, fence installation, fence repair, fence design, custom construction, and other. So you can select whatever one's there. Usually I don't select other. I just feel like it gives Google too much power. And I'd rather kind of specify exactly what I want, because basically other could cover everything, which I don't want. And decks we talked about. There's no subcategories there. Okay, so this is a really big one. I actually just got off a call with a new lead today, and this was something that they mentioned to me in terms of their budget, and I knew instantly it was going to be a problem, or in this case, a way to improve and get towards what they wanted. Google will ask you to set a weekly budget. So you can basically kind of divide if you have a monthly budget in mind, just divide it by 4. So if you want to spend, say, 2,000 a month, you could divide it by 4, make it 500. That will kind of help you break it down. But what we have seen is Google seems to rank somebody higher if they have a bigger budget. So if you have a small budget, like today, the example, they set it to like $200 a week. Or maybe it was like $100 a week, I think. So it's a very small budget. If you have competitors over there that are saying they'll do $6,000 or $10,000 a week, they're going to basically outrank you very easily. But the key thing to note here is, just because you set the budget to 6,000 or 10,000 or 100,000, whatever, it doesn't mean that you're going to spend that amount. That's kind of the beauty of local services ads. You only spend if the leads actually come in. So what we recommend is you set a very big budget. You could say 6,000 a month or 10,000, and then just monitor it, kind of see the leads that are coming in and adjusting it if you start to spend too much. I would say most of the time clients just kind of open it up and run it for up to its max, because that's what will basically since it's such low risk, high reward, and as long as they have the crews and the sales staff to manage the leads, they kind of say bring it on, because they can handle it. And the amount of leads can vary day to day, definitely depending on the budget, but they should never outspend what you set. And then there is a new AI rating process, which I'll talk about here in a second, where you can kind of rate the leads. In the past, it was a little bit easier to kind of get your money back if it was a bad lead, like say somebody called looking for a job or something. It was harder to do that in the past, whereas now it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, and I'll cover the dispute process here in a second. So these are the type of leads that should not be charged. I wouldn't say Google's perfect with all of this, but this is kind of what you're looking at in terms of what should not be charged. And even Google can not dispute these, but not charge you for them on their end. They use AI to kind of do that. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But in general, spam or solicitation leads, which I'm sure everybody's gotten, wrong service area, that's a really big one. If somebody's contacting you from outside the area that you told Google you want. And then also services just don't match, like a repair when you don't want those, job seekers, repeat leads, or wrong numbers or voicemails. So I think everybody listening has probably gotten all of those calls. So it's really important to make sure you know that these should not be billed to you. And if they are, I'll show you how you can do that after. All right. So clients, we run these a lot, fencing especially. And this is kind of what we've seen from our clients, what we see personally, and then also we get feedback from clients to know kind of what they're seeing from their end. So in general, it's a much lower cost per lead than pay-per-click, and then it's also lower than Home Advisor and all other and really other lead generation services. And the beauty of it is, if you are using Home Advisor or Angie, you've probably seen that it's frustrating because they will send that same lead to everybody or to multiple competitors. So with Google local services ads, that's not going to happen unless they actually go in there and reach out to multiple people. It won't just naturally go to all these other people. So that's a big deal, of course, and I hear that complaint a lot, very, very often, with Angie and all these other companies. So you need to make sure that you're kind of paying attention to that. And, what we're big on here in terms of that whole omnipresence ordeal is showing up constantly, but also looking like that type of company that attracts the high-end customers that you want. So if you're getting a lot of tire kickers, there's signs for that. You can always get tire kickers no matter what, but we've been able to have clients that are, especially if they're trying to go after higher end projects, separate themselves as a more expensive option, which will lead to better leads and kind of keep those price shoppers away from you. The ROI, so we track all of that. We can see how many leads come, but we can't see exactly what the jobs are sold for. So from your end, you want to make sure that you are tracking that to see how much revenue actually came from those jobs and how that worked out. In general, local services ads for fencing companies is a no-brainer. And the reasons, for the decking side, I think it's a good idea to give a try if you're going to do it internally. It's not something that we would do unless it was also paired with, pay-per-click ads, because we just can't promise enough leads to actually get enough jobs to make it worth the investment. But if you're doing it on your own end, I think it's worth testing for sure. But for fencing, it's a no-brainer either way. And basically because you're showing up at the top of the results. So 87% of people go to Google and you show up right at the top when you use these. And you're only paying per lead, lower cost generally than pay-per-click, and then also the other lead generation sites. And there's no forever with local services ads. You can always increase or decrease your budget. Personally, I wouldn't just do that constantly. I would let it run and find a way to manage those leads versus scaling it back, because you would rather stay on Google's good side and continue to get those leads in the future. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how you actually get set up, how that works. Of course, little disclaimer here: if you work with us, we set this up for you. We'll help you go through it. We don't do the background checks for you, but we can help just about everything else and get you approved so you can get started with those. It is kind of depends, but usually 1 to 2-ish weeks it can take to kind of get through and get started. But we can always help you through that and everything we'll be talking about here. So that's the website. Just you can go to that link or just Google local services ads, and that'll pop up, and just click get started. This is the eligibility. I think it's available just about everywhere. So I've never seen it not be eligible. So you should be fine in either category to run these. So it shouldn't be much of a worry there. And then this is kind of how the rankings work. So you get set up and all that stuff. But once you get through that, once you get the background check, then you got to figure out how it actually works. And during the setup process, you want to do it in a certain way that will, get you the best chance at success. So everything with marketing has got its advantages and disadvantages, just like local services ads. They have their advantages and disadvantages, just like Google pay-per-click has advantages and disadvantages, and SEO has advantages and disadvantages. So there's nothing that's perfect, but I want to at least put everybody in the best possible situation to get the best return on their money. So in general, like everything, you do have to worry about competition. and how many people are in your area. So if you have a ton of people, usually this happens in like major metro areas, it's going to limit the number of leads you have, which means you need to likely have a bigger budget. You need to be better than they are and following the things that we'll be talking about here. But proximity is a really a big deal. So with local services ads, you can kind of set to whatever area you want to rank for. But we have seen that if you are physically located close to your basically target customers, it's easier for you to rank there. So kind of like SEO, but not quite as restricted. But in general, if you have a Google business profile and you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere and not near your target customers, it's only going to make your life harder for ranking in those target areas. Reviews and responsiveness. Reviews are huge always for everything I'll ever talk about. People want to see those reviews. They trust them so much. So you need to make sure that you're looking at those. It wouldn't make sense to run local services ads if you have a 3 out of 5 review rating. It's probably not going to work out very well. And the leads you get are probably pretty terrible. So, 4.6 or higher, ideally, 4.8 or higher. But you need to pay attention to this because that's also going to help your local services ads rankings. So it's not enough to just pay for them and go unless you don't need many leads. But if you want to really utilize these and get the full power from them, you want to make sure you're doing whatever you can to kind of be that leader in reviews. And we see this constantly with clients. The clients that have the most reviews and are really killing it, they tend to be the ones that are killing it with reviews too. So it's a great way to help with SEO and also local services ads. Call tracking and responsiveness. So it's very important, huge, 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 to make sure you actually pick up every call that comes in. So before we start working with the client to do local services ads, we get dialed in whoever's picking up the phones, basically. So if you're letting calls go missed, Google will see that, and then they will rank you lower. And we've actually seen them just almost basically just not rank your local services ads because you started missing the calls in the beginning. So you need to make sure you're on the right foot there. You are picking up the calls and talking to them, and Google will track that as well. Also, the hours. So this is a big deal too. And another reason why I always recommend having 24/7 answering service or just somebody that's available to answer always. Because in SEO, you're going to rank better in those off times if your competitors are closed. But also with local services ads, they're just going to rank you better because of that. So they want to, Google, as you probably expect, they're more inclined to take care of the people that are using their service and paying more money. And if you're open up longer, then they view that as a business that's willing to stay open later, spend more money with them. So you kind of want to tailor your strategy to that as well to make sure you're always there when needed. And also the leads that you have, Google kind of does their best to spread the leads out over time. It doesn't always work like that, and it kind of depends on your budget. So if you really max out that budget and you have a good reputation with Google, you should be able to get them pretty consistently. But if you have a small budget, they're going to kind of spread them out over time. All right. So here's some more ways to win with local services ads, best strategies. And so we talked about this. Answering the calls. This should be a no-brainer regardless, not just local services ads, but with them, because it's so serious, I make it basically a requirement to do them with us because I want to make sure that the calls are actually getting answered, their account doesn't get ruined, and we're not blamed for that. But in general, it should be something you're figuring out. If you have an in-office staff, that's great. We like using answering services because you don't have to worry about hiring or getting backups or anything like that if somebody's sick. So you can just always have somebody available. And there's a lot of great ones out there. One of them that we always refer to as Jill's office. This is something you have to get fixed if you want to get full benefit of local services ads. So I wouldn't, I mean, you can run these. We wouldn't do it, but you could run them, I guess, and hope for the best that you pick up enough calls, but or you have low competition. But in general, if you really want this to kind of be something that works for you long term, I would recommend getting some kind of answering service. All right, so getting your profile built out, all of this and doing it the right way. Your profile, got to make sure that's done correctly. We talked about the budget and making sure you have a bigger one than your competition, ideally. So, you could set it to say 1,500 a week. I think that's what we usually do. Could be even higher than that if clients need it, and that'll tell you how many leads you can get to on, as an estimate. So that can also be a way if you want to grow by a certain revenue amount, figure out how many, what your conversion rate is, and then figure out how many leads it takes to get enough opportunities to close enough business to hit it. So you kind of reverse engineer that process and go into local services ads. This can be a way to kind of help you get closer to that, but don't expect it to be perfect, but it is at least a start. All right. Said this a bunch, open up that budget and just monitor from there if you're worried about spending too much. And you can update the ad schedule. So if you don't have an answering service, you want to basically make sure the people can only reach you during the hours you have somebody that can answer the phones. Make sure those job types are good and the service areas. So when you do the service areas, it kind of shows you a map. You can enter cities and zip codes. What we've typically seen is if you enter a county and then exclude areas within that county, it tends to work better than entering a whole bunch of zip codes or cities. Not really sure why, but there just seems to be holes in the map and missing areas when you enter just cities or zip codes. So that's why I prefer the counties. And then photos. So any photos that you have, add a bunch of those, the high quality images, of course. Don't use stock images. And then if you have individual services, make sure you have at least 5 photos for each of those services too. Okay, so it's not enough when you're running local services ads to just run them and pick up the calls and go from there, especially if you want to be competitive or you really want to get your, as many as possible. So what Google wants to see is they want to get data on what's going on. They're going to record the calls, but they want to see if the jobs are booked and all that stuff. So you need to make sure you're going into this system, looking at all the leads, marking them as archived, marking them as booked, and that tells Google, that you're actually managing the leads in the back end. And you want to make sure you are marking some as booked, even if you're not. That shows up as a good indicator for them too, not just archiving every lead and making sure you're going through those consistently. So I'll go through those, multiple times a week. Okay, so basically what they're looking for when you're doing this is they're tracking your responsiveness and how on top of it you are. So if you want to make sure you're marking them as booked, and then you also want to make sure you're adding those customer details. So any kind of details that they give you, you want to make sure you're putting those into Google, not just in your CRM or wherever, and then also include their email address. And later on, when you include their email, you're able to send review requests and things like that. If there was a bad opportunity, you can archive it. Just make sure you're not archiving most. And I think you want to shoot for about a 80% booked rate. I think was that's kind of the number to go to. All right, so it's inevitable that you're going to get leads that are not what you want. So you need to rate the leads and say basically tell Google what your thought of each lead was. So if you get a lead that was for repair, but you only wanted installs and Google still charge you for it, you want to make sure you rate that lead and tell them you're dissatisfied with it. Kind of a good tip with all of these when you're on these calls and you're speaking with them, it's good to try to get that language in there to say, we don't do repairs or, something like that says like we don't do what they're offering. That makes it easier to kind of dispute the lead. And then this is kind of where you can enter that information, the name, the email, your notes. So typically the notes just add like what kind of job it was and what it was, all that kind of stuff. And these are the different options: very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, either satisfied nor dissatisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, or very dissatisfied. Um, so basically, you want to put in there whatever the case may be. And if you got a good quality lead, you can do the same. You can go in here and kind of say your what you thought of each lead in general. So in general, you should not be charged for unqualified leads. So anything outside of your service area, not a service you provide, you shouldn't be charged for them. Pretty good amount of the time, Google will recognize if it's like a spam lead or something like that and not charge you, but they're sort of not perfect at it. So make sure that you monitor them, you go through them, you categorize them, all that stuff. And then if you see your charge for one that you know is not a good lead, make sure you're disputing it. So the reviews. So I talked about the importance of reviews. If you're the king of getting reviews in your area, you might not even need this, but this is a very powerful way to get a better established better reputation with Google by getting these what's called verified reviews. So just like a normal review, those will show up on the Google listing, but they also have verified reviews that are kind of like the Amazon purchase. You know, you buy something from Amazon or you go to and you click on the reviews and then they say like verified purchaser or something like that. It's the same kind of concept here. So once it's all done and it's completed, you can, if you have that email specified, you can basically ask for a verified or ask for a review. And if they leave one, that'll then be a verified review, which can help with rankings a lot. I said this before, say it again. Got to get reviews figured out. Not even just for local services ads, but reviews should be part of the infrastructure of your company and doing whatever it takes to get them. So figuring out how to incentivize your team, offering different incentives there or bonuses or whatever. It's going to be some of the best money you can spend. And I would recommend doing it no matter, at any cost, maybe not any cost, but whatever it takes, you got to get that installed into the company because it's going to pay off huge dividends in the future. And also, if you think about it, if you don't, you're just leaving that opportunity over for your competitors. So they could pass you and then you never be able to catch them again, versus you could do the exact same to them and forever look better than them online, which will lead to a lot more reviews, more revenue, all that stuff. Of course, nothing is going to replace good service. So don't get bad reviews and things like that. And try to do those verified reviews the best you can. That's what it looks like at the Google verified job, in case you're wondering. All right, so just kind of a recap here of how to increase the lead flow. So you want to open up that budget, make sure you have a big enough budget and monitor that closely, expand the service areas. So that's another thing I see as a common problem. Businesses will be like, hey, well, these are the zip codes, they give like a list of 10 or something like that. If you do it that way with LSAs, you're likely going to be disappointed because it's usually not going to be a big enough area. And Google doesn't like those small areas either. So try to expand your service area, push your boundaries out, usually at least a county, I would say, but ideally more than that. And that's going to help a lot with how you do, how many leads you get. And also keep in mind, when you're talking about service areas, somebody could, say they live in this county that you want to work in, but they work in another county. They work in the city, but they live out in the county, whatever. If they're at work and they're searching for a fence or a deck, and you don't have that city specified, you're not going to show up. So it's good to have that. It's kind of a thing, and also not even just work, but out to dinner or hanging out with friends, whatever. Anything like that, you're not going to show up even if they actually live in there. So it's important to do that. Make sure you have the right job types, the schedule, and close out all those leads, booked, archived, all of that, and then try to request those reviews. But without a doubt, non-negotiable, making reviews part of your company's culture is going to help out a lot. Okay, so for anybody here that said they're not doing it, local services ads, this is kind of how you would do it. And sign up at that link, do the background checks, I would recommend putting some kind of tracking in place, and then going into the platform, editing it, trying to get your money back if wasn't, and then really just playing the game as long as the ROI makes sense. As of right now, and for many years before, ROI has definitely made sense. But if you're not picking up the calls, if you're not managing the leads, it's not going to be worth it. So make sure you're doing all that, and it's going to lead to a lot more success. All right, so what we covered: Google local services ads, what they are, where they're active, how it works, best practices, how you can get started, what it takes to get in the top, and then how you can take advantage of this. So highly recommend anybody that hasn't tried them or is currently doing them and not following these practices, give it a try. It's what we do. It's what we've seen work and can really separate yourself.